Let us thank the John Wesley African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church Choir. Good morning, everyone. My name is Thomas Bowen, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Director of the Mayor's Office of Religious Affairs. And it is a joy to see each and every one of you all join us here for this DC Faith Leaders Breakfast as we celebrate Black History, DC. Let us pray. And God, for this day, we give thee thanks. For the opportunity to come together, we give thee thanks. We thank you for the prosperity that abounds throughout the District of Columbia. We thank you for our leader, Mayor Muriel Bowser. We thank you for all those who make the city what it is, past and present. Be with us as we continue to celebrate the accomplishments and achievements of Washington, D.C. We ask traveling mercy for those who are still en route. In your name, amen. It is my singular pleasure to welcome now to the microphone someone who I have the pleasure of serving, someone I have a great deal of respect for, none other than our mayor, the Honorable Mayor Muriel Bowser.
Well, good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to see you all this morning and to be here at the beautiful Museum of the Bible. And let's thank our host at the Museum of the Bible. We were delighted just a few months back to help open this beautiful facility and to add it to the wonderful portfolio of options that DC residents and visitors to the nation's capital and our region have to enjoy when they come to Washington, D.C. I am also happy to be here with my predecessor, Mayor Tony Williams, and I want to give Mayor Williams, there he is, a big round of applause, and thank Mayor Williams for his tremendous leadership of our city and of the Federal City Council, which is a partner to DC government in so many ways, and especially how we build prosperity around our city. I was delighted when Mayor Williams suggested that we host together the faith community of Washington, D.C., because he knows, like I know, that the government can do a lot. It's true. But we can do so much more in partnership with trusted, committed, and effective organizations all around our city. And in a time when people feel anxious, when they feel scared, when they are in need of inspiration and hope, we can help, but the faith community can do so much more in helping our residents feel calm and safe and inspired and hopeful. And that is why we are always happy to work in partnership with houses of faith all across Washington, D.C. I know that the members of the council share that view, and I have the opportunity to work with them each and every day on the priorities that we have for our city. And I'm just delighted that several of them have been able to join us this morning. Let me start with the Ward 2 council member, Jack Evans, who's here. I also see at-large member, council member Robert White. Robert. And at-large council member Anita Bonds. Thank you, Anita, for being here with us today. You have also had the opportunity to hear from Reverend Thomas Bowen, who leads the Mayor's Office of Religious Affairs. And Thomas has really been God sent to us his spirit and his energy, his intellect, and his willingness to roll up his sleeves and help his colleagues across the District of Columbia, our administrative policies, and working on any issue that comes before us has been critically important to the work that we do. I don't have to tell you that Washington, D.C. is indeed a growing city. We were last probably this big in the 1950s, and we had a steady decline of population after 1968, until this guy with a bow tie had a big idea. And that big idea was that we would reset the expectations of our city and the world about how a capital city would grow and invest in its people. And Mayor Williams and his team set a bold vision for how our city would grow by at least 100,000 people. And you see that growth was important because you don't want to be a city where people leave. You want to be a city where people want to come. And where people want to come to be productive and to invest and to add to the fabric of the District of Columbia. So this year, I'm proud to say, after many years of many people working diligently on planning and building a diverse and strong city, not only did we grow by more than 100,000 people, we're going to reach 700,000 people this year in Washington, D.C. And with that growth comes prosperity. And as the theory goes, a rising tide lifts all boats. Now, that may be true, but what we have seen in the District of Columbia is that some boats rise more quickly than others. So what our focus has to be is on how we can be intentional in our investments so that all Washingtonians are participating in our prosperity. We know that the story of many cities is unequal distribution of benefits from a robust economy. So we have to collectively be focused on how to disrupt that trend. We have developed a 5-year economic development strategy, for example, which we released last year, and we are finding new ways to address the unique challenges of underserved communities in the District of Columbia. The faith community is a big part of that strategy. You have heard me talk often about our doubled commitment to affordable housing in the District of Columbia. When I became mayor, we were spending about $50 million a year out of our Housing Production Trust Fund, and I did double that in our first budget, our second budget, and our third budget. And I'm very grateful to the members of the council who have been there every step of the way. I want to especially acknowledge Councilmember Anita Bonds, who is the at-large council member for housing, who has been very focused on how not only that we budget that $100 million, but how we spend it and produce units. So we have been able to produce 5,000 units in the last 3 years. I say that the faith community is important because I asked Reverend Bowen and his predecessor to work with us on how we could focus the faith community's efforts on housing. Previously, we had seen a lot of discussion out of our Mayor's Office of Religious Affairs on any number of issues that churches had. Some very serious, like parking. And the needs of residents who would come in great need. And we talked about that a lot. But one thing that we knew that we had in common to talk about was the land that churches have control of and own, and the needs that we have in the district to produce more affordable housing. So we thought, how could we be very focused on talking about that very common interest? And that is what the Mayor's Office of Religious Affairs has focused on. Along with our Housing Director, Polly Donaldson, and our Deputy Mayor for Greater Economic Opportunity, we have had many partnerships, as you can can see in front of us of where the city has invested with churches and building affordable housing. One I just passed this morning at the Emory United Methodist Church, who's been working on transforming its sanctuary and will deliver 99 units of affordable housing on Georgia Avenue this year. Recently, local interfaith coalitions in 25 places of worship, including Shiloh Baptist and John Wesley Zion, work with our Department of Behavioral Health to better promote understanding and awareness of behavioral health challenges that face our residents. And with the help of churches like Foundry United Methodist, which assists residents with attaining copies of their birth certificates, we are expanding our ability to support returning citizens. We are very grateful to faith-based locations, including Adas Israel and the Matthews Memorial Baptist Church, that serve our residents each and every day, seniors across all 8 wards. And many faith-based organizations around the district have partnered with our Department of Employment Services to help us with workforce training programs like LEAP and Career Connections and Project Empowerment to get more Washingtonians on the pathway to the middle class. And over the past few years, we know that we've made a lot of progress together, and we know that there's so much more that we can do. I want to thank all the clergy and leaders and deacons and folks who have just really worked with their parishioners over the last year, who's been very anxiety-filled for our residents, including our churches who give us space. Just a few weeks back, we had a church full of people talking about our immigration justice grants and how they can work with us to make sure that their rights are being protected. So thank you for being with us today. Thank you for working with our administration these 3.5 years on how to make life better for the residents of the District of Columbia, ensure that we're a vibrant economic city, and ensure that more Washingtonians are participating in our progress. Thank you very much.
Let us give our mayor another round of applause. We're moving, and we're moving in the right direction. We're going to have a slight change in our program because of a time constraint. The Honorable Congressman Emanuel Cleaver II will have to depart, but before he does so, we're going to have him to come forth and give us some remarks. Let us welcome Congressman Cleaver.
Madam Mayor, Mayor, members of the City Council, and those of you who come this morning, I apologize. About 3 years ago, being one of only 2 ordained pastors in the House, I was asked to start Thursday morning off in the Democratic caucus with a blessing. The blessing has turned into a mini sermon, and the one day has turned into 3 years. And so now every Thursday morning at 9, I'm expected to stand up before my colleagues and say something profound. Let me just say the presence of Brother Bowen, Madam Mayor, I think is a fabulous sign to have an Office of Religious Affairs. As I was sitting here, I was thinking, I regret the fact that when I was mayor, I didn't have that kind of vision to do that, and I guess I ended up playing that role myself. But let me just say very very quickly that we as a nation, of all the nations on the planet, can least afford to function in a city or a community without the faith component. It is an incomplete city. without faith. And if you study all the despots, all of the tyrants, one of the first things they tried to do was to either weaken or destroy the church. I mean, Hitler told his inner council, give me 3 years and I'll own the religious leaders. It didn't happen. Nimoy said, I'll put my life on the line. And so did many other clergy in Germany. And so I think cities, states, and nations function better when there's a strong faith component. I grew up in a family of activists. My older cousin, Eldridge Cleaver, ended up going to the Panthers, and my other cousin, Pete O'Neill, who's now the only exiled Panther in Tanzania, which I will see next week, they chose one route. But growing up with a grandfather and a great-grandfather and two uncles and a cousin of Cleaver preachers, I moved into another direction, went to seminary, and I am 100% certain that was the best move for me. And for one reason, I didn't get indicted, and I didn't have to leave the country. But I love them anyway. Don't get me wrong. I love my people. But one of the things that has happened, unfortunately, is there is sometimes this unspoken effort to get faith out of government. One Sunday, I'm in church and I'm listening to my grandpa, and he tells the congregation about this the Sunday that he went into one of the little Sunday school classes, and the two none of you pastors have this in your church, but these were two little demons. But one was 12 and one was 10 demons. And so he goes in and he says, look, I want to ask some of you Sunday schoolers today, tell me this, where do you think God is? Where do you think God is located? And one of the little boys was gone, and so the man noticed, the pastor noticed immediately, one of them was not there, but he thought, okay, I'll call on him. And so he said, Timmy, tell everybody where God is. And Timmy jumped up screaming, ran out the door, ran down into the basement, found his brother in there pouring milk down the drain, and he said, Terrence, we got to get out of here. And they said, why? He said, God is missing and they think we got him. I think people have had God missing in many of the roles that God and the people of faith must play. And, this is a world, we're moving faster than we ever moved in automobiles, and we're on the verge of driverless cars. Computers are functioning at warp speed. And you look at how the world is just advancing and advancing and advancing. And one of the things that we need to be to take into account at this particular moment is that if we make all of these advancements and begin to lose our faith, this nation will not continue to soar as it has for over 240 years. We've got to continue to make God the center. And I want to tell you something, and we need to make sure people in Washington, D.C. know this, that there is nothing they can do. They can work all day long and all night long. They can pray all day. There's nothing they can do to get God to love them more than he does right now. And God has smiled on us. And so because God has, and smiled on this beautiful city, I've been all over the world. You're not going to find a place like Washington, D.C. And the stuff is free. I'm not trying to say start charging. I'm just saying I'm just saying it's good to go into the museums and so forth and so on. I mean, this is a great nation we have, and because it's great, for those of us who understand that it's great because we have a good and loving God, we need to never, ever allow faith to slip off the table. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you. God bless you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Let us once again thank Congressman Cleaver for those warm remarks. And I will resist the temptation to pass the offering plate. Now it is my pleasure to bring forth remarks, as has been stated, the former mayor of Washington, D.C., the Honorable Mayor Anthony Williams.
How's everyone this morning? Very, very good. Very pleased to be here with our mayor. Very, very pleased to be here with Carrie Summers, the president of the Bible Museum. All of our council members who are here, both current and former council members. For example, my good friend Sandy Allen, former council member from Ward 8. Give her a big hand. The mayor has acknowledged our other council members, and so I certainly want to welcome them. I'm particularly pleased that we have a number, and I won't get into trouble by trying to name them all, but we have a number of our trustees here from the Federal City Council, including Bob Flanagan, who thinks he's retired as chairman. No, he is. He's still working as if he were still chairman, former chairman of the Federal City Council, Bob Flanagan. And at that, a couple years ago, Bob was part of, they've now split apart, but Bob was part of Clark Construction that was actually responsible for building the museum. So let's give our trustees a big hand and thank them for the leadership of the Federal City Council. Trustee, I will mention, who's been real counsel to me in my time as mayor, was one of my first supporters. I hope she doesn't regret it. Now in the ministry, and I've been to a number of her services, and she does such a beautiful job. Give Michelle Hagans a big hand. Reverend Michelle Hagans and her family have done so much in D.C. And I am so pleased that the mayor has in place, mayor in Office of Religious Affairs, because, you know, as many of you know, the Office of Religious Affairs for me is kind of like the Olympics, you know, the glory of victory, they were with me. The agony of defeat, they were with me. Can you imagine getting up in the morning and finding that you were running unopposed and are no longer on the ballot? I mean, that is misery defined. You know, how did this happen? And the faith community didn't come to me and say, "You idiot, how could you do this?" They were responsive. They were supportive. They were always providing that light. And so the brief kind of reflection I would offer you today, and please don't hold me to particular citations of Scripture. You know, two things I think about guidance. You know, Reverend Cleaver talked about we need that faith, we need that guidance. You know, there was a funny cartoon about the Israelites had left Egypt, and they were wandering through the desert, and Moses was looking at the map. He had it upside down, and Joshua finally said, "I'll take the map." You know, I thought that was funny. You know, get it? You know. So this notion of guidance and faith providing us, you know, a way forward is so important, because to me, to have a city without a faith community and without any kind of relationship to the faith community really is like trying to drive your car at night without any headlights. You know, it really is. So think about a museum. You know, I woke up one day, I'm looking in the paper, and I was very, very struck to see that this famous painting in a museum, nothing like the Museum of the Bible. This was a painting in the Gardner Museum up in Boston. It's a kind of nondescript place. You walk into this nondescript building, and it opens up into this beautiful museum with all these priceless pieces in the museum. The funny thing about this museum, though, unlike the Museum of the Bible, this isn't like 21st century interpretation and interaction. It's like one of these museums where it's like, here's a famous piece, deal with it. I mean, that's kind of like the interpretation. It's like there, hanging on the wall. In this museum was this incredible painting called Storm on the Sea of Galilee by Rembrandt. What a beautiful painting, because the way Rembrandt, and only Rembrandt could capture that light, there was a figure of the Lord just about ready to calm the storm. You had the radiant light from the Christ figure and the tumultuous sea before him. And we know that this light is so important, this faith is so important in pointing the way for all of us, because Matthew tells us if you follow this light, if you follow this faith, you're going to build a greater city. And that's what I'd like to think all of you are doing with our mayor, is we're moving forward, following this light, following our faith toward a greater city. So thank all of you for being here today with all of us at the Federal City Council and the Museum of the Bible. And can I just bring Kerry on up now to welcome everyone here. Give Kerry Summers a big hand and thank him for everything he's done. Thank you, Kerry.
Thank you, Tony. He's been a great advisor to us. When you come into Washington, you have extreme fear, especially from a guy from the Midwest. And I've shared this many times, and I'll share it today, that of all the cities and the countries, because we work at many, we have never been received so well by a community as Washington, D.C. And I'll say it again, and I get challenged this every time I say it, but we have never had this much cooperation from federal and local jurisdictions of any place we've ever been. And so that's I commend you. I mean, really and truly, and I'm your biggest salesperson to get people to come to Washington. So, and Tony, thank you. Thank you. And Madam Mayor, I would, interesting you brought up a point, because we survey our guests every 2 weeks. We found out e-surveys are much more accurate than somebody leaving the museum. And then we have a tremendous amount of surveys we do. We also do a Google search, and we Google analytics. The number one question we get before people come, you would think it's, what do you have in the museum? Where do what can I do when I'm there? Nope. How do I find parking? That's the number one. True story. And so there you go. We verify your concern. But this museum is really a blessing. It has been to us, and we want it to be to the city. We chose Washington because of, frankly, economics. We felt like it would be best served here in the community. But God has blessed us with this. We were able to build this museum. We had 5,000 people work on the site. Virtually all were what we call our friends around the building here. And then we had over 3,000 people who elsewhere who were involved in this. But 5,000 here. Of the approximately, based on soft cost and hard cost, $600 million. Virtually, it was all Clark Construction. It did an unbelievable job. I can't praise them enough. Smith Group was our architect here in D.C. And virtually all of our major suppliers came from this market. And it's a real tribute to the strength of this market, but also to great workmanship. And you can see it here. A couple things that you might find interesting. Our average drive distance to get to this museum, that counts the people who walk from Capitol Hill over here, is 309 miles. That's the average, which means we have, if you put a pin here, you go up 600 miles. That's where we're at. And that continues to go on. And the other surveys that we're getting is that for many, 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 it will be the first time they will be coming to Washington, or have not come in many years. And they're coming, for the museum, which we're so grateful that not only we, I think, elevate and add a faith component to the whole region, but we also are attracting people here that have never been here. So it was something we thought we would try to accomplish, and we did. We are incredibly blessed to have the support of the Protestant community, the Jewish community, and the Catholic community. It's beyond anything that we designed it this way. We were hoping this would be, but it's far exceeded anything we've ever thought that could be accomplished here. To have all three major faith traditions involved with us, heavily involved and supporting, and we haven't had any food fights yet. It all works good, and that's one thing that we found out is to rip down some of these walls, and it's amazing what God does and how he blesses that when you rip down those walls between people group. And so that was one of our intents, and many in this room have helped us do that. And thank you for everyone here. And enjoy the museum, and hopefully in 50 years we can give you another report. Thanks.